So if you're someone who does photography or anything creative for that matter, there's a lot of pressure of course to try and be original in some way. However, I've seen a lot of people, for them, that originality just means to be the first to do something. So for example, you're the first person to ever make a photograph completely in black and white but have elements in colour, or the first person to write a story where the main character breaks the fourth wall. However, I don't think that's the only way that you can be original, or the only thing that matters when it comes to being creative. Now we've all been there. Whether you're an artist, a writer, or in my case a photographer, you read up on the basics, maybe looked online for some inspiration, but now comes the hard part. Now you need to start writing down your own ideas and start creating your own work. Now, I've noticed that if you go online and watch any sort of these discussions about creativity, then what you notice a lot has to say is this thing about all these sort of buzzwords of, be the first or find your niche. Now, from a business standpoint, this absolutely makes sense. If you're the first person to do something in a certain business area, you're going to eliminate a lot of the competition. And another thing from a creative standpoint, of course, we're all trying to do the same thing. We're all trying to stand out from the crowd in some way. But I've even seen it go as far, for example, that I've watched critiques of photographs, and you might have this photograph of the Milky Way, and people just be like, well, it's not very good, they just kind of dismiss it, like, I've seen this before. Even though, technically it's absolutely spot on, the composition is great, it's just such a great photograph, but it's like, you know what, it's nothing revolutionary, so it doesn't really matter too much. I disagree with this idea that this is the only thing that creatives should be looking for, or that someone's work is less valuable because someone else has done something similar in the past. I think at the end of the day, if you were to take an idea and put your own spin on it, then this is something that's also worthwhile aiming for if you're a creative person. Now, there's a great TED talk you may have heard before by a guy called Sinek, and he talks a lot about starting with why rather than what. He talks a lot about how businesses start off with what they do rather than thinking about why they do it. Now, there's a lot in this talk, and I'll put a link to it in the description below, but one of the key things in this talk for me is he discusses this point of the race to be the first man flight, and the fact that the Wright brothers were the first ones to achieve this. However, though, he also talks about a guy called a Samuel Pierpont Langley. Now, this guy Langley, no one's ever really heard of before, yet he was still trying to do the same thing the Wright brothers were, and he had the better funding, the better minds behind him, the better publicity than the Wright brothers had. However, the Wright brothers beat him to it to be the first of the first man flight. And Sinek makes the point that the reason for this is the reason why they were doing it. For Langley, it was all about being first and being rich and famous, something he could hang his hat on to say he was the first guy that achieved this. But for the Wright brothers, they believed in what they were doing. They believed in it so much they gave their blood and sweat and tears, and so did the people that helped them, and that's why they were the first to be able to get there. Now, the key point for me here that Sinek makes in this talk is that he says that even when the Wright brothers beat Langley to it, Langley could have said, you know what, acknowledge what their achievement was and said, that's a great thing they've done, I'm going to try and improve on that. And he could look to improve on the work that they had done and essentially take things to the next level. But he didn't. He quit. He wasn't rich, he wasn't the first, he didn't get famous from it. And I think a really similar thing can be applied to creativity. So for example, you can't always be the first person to be sort of revolutionary in some way, but you can always look to even the greater challenge is it takes something that's been done before and develop it or look at it from a fresh perspective that no one else has done previously. Now, the race for the first man flight is obviously a bit more of a innovation and invention example rather than creativity. So if we look at it more from a creative standpoint, let's look for example even at movies. So you think of all the movies that are made every year, but there's a widely held opinion that there's only 7 basic movie plots. But this doesn't stop writers and directors and creators of movies every year producing more and more films. Even if you look at it more specifically, look at even superhero movies alone, which are obviously very popular these days, the MCU alone has over 20 movies in it. And that's not including any of the sort of superhero movies made by other studios. Now, the writers of these movies don't just sit there and think to themselves, well, you know what, it's been done before, there's no point in us trying to do the same thing and retell the same story. They sit there and look at, well, what's the things that we can do differently? How can we put our own spin on it, look at it from a fresh perspective and take it to the next level that's not been done before? I took this photograph here of Carlton Hill in Edinburgh, and it's one of the best pictures I've ever taken. However, if you just Google Carlton Hill Edinburgh, you'll see hundreds if not thousands of examples of this type of picture because it's a really common spot. So the picture itself isn't groundbreaking or revolutionary in any way, there's plenty of people who've taken pictures of this location, but does that mean it's a bad photograph? I don't think so. I'm still proud of what I've done with this. I've managed to slightly change the composition a bit further down than the usual spot the photographers are there, and I used a long exposure to make the clouds a little bit blurry to put my own kind of spin on it. Just because there's been other people who've done similar pictures of this in the past doesn't mean it's not something I'm proud of, and doesn't mean it's not some of my best work. Now, just to be clear, I'm not saying you should be copying someone else's work, or that people like the Wright brothers or those are the first ones to start writing stories with superheroes don't deserve the credit they get. They absolutely do, and no one else can take that away from them. And of course, when you actually do your own work, of course you have to be creative in some way, you have to be original, and you need to put your own spin on things and develop an idea. And being the first is still a great goal for every creative person to have. You know, it's a great thing to be able to do, to actually go out there and try and be the first person to do something that no one else has done before. At the end of the day, for example, I could have a great idea for a photograph, but if it's out of focus, if it's underexposed, if it's bloody, then it doesn't really matter too much in terms of what my idea was, even though it was nice and first and being revolutionary and great, if I haven't executed it properly. And I actually think it can be an unhealthy obsession if you just always focus on trying to be the first all the time. Because you can easily get disheartened when you look at whatever someone else is photographing or writing or painting compared to you, and you might feel like they've already beaten you to it. Even if we take this channel, I'm certainly not the first photographer to ever create a YouTube channel. But it's up to me to look at what equipment I have, come up with some new ideas, try and execute things in a way that people will respond to. That's the challenge I need to rise to when creating these videos. At the end of the day, when you're sitting there thinking about what to write or what to photograph or what to film, then don't get disheartened by what someone else has done before you. Instead, take on the challenge and put your own stamp on an idea. If you're able to take a concept that's already been done before and either execute it, innovate it, or express it in a way no one else has done previously, then that's still creativity worth aiming for in my book. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this topic in the comment section below. And if you did enjoy it, please do hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next one.